This is the Bama Podcast with Marty Solomon. I'm his co-host, Brent Billings. Today we are joined by special guest John Roberts to discuss his book, A Griever's Guide to Life. John grew up going to church with his parents and became a Christian while at Clemson University. He currently serves in children's ministry and as an usher, and he enjoys spending time hiking, camping, and doing woodworking projects with his father. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brent.
And I don't know if you want to add anything to that introduction, talk about your family. I know we're going to get into that throughout the episode, but just if you want to add a little more color to what I've already said.
The finer things, John, we call it. The finer things of life.
The finer things. Well, you started off right. I've been married for 30 years to my wife, Beta, and we have 3 children. I'll get to that in a minute. I have been a Christian for 37 years now. Seems like a long time. I became a Christian when I was 18 at a great campus ministry at Clemson University, part of the Foothills Church of Christ back in the day. And I have 2 sisters, and the fun fact is I'm an identical twin. I have an identical twin brother. Beta and I have 3 children. My son, whom I love, Timmy, he's 28. He'll always be Timmy. And my beautiful daughter, Emily, whom I also love. She's 26. They both live here in the Atlanta area. And our youngest, Olivia, is kind of where we welcome everyone to our world, right? She would have been 23 at the time of this recording. And I apologize in advance. Some of this might be emotional. And but she is kind of forever 18. And I know that's not your, typical intro in terms of finer things, but it's just kind of part of our world and part of whether we're sitting across the dinner table from someone or on a podcast, it's never easy. And we don't really have the vocabulary to bring people into this, in a way that's easy.
Well, that's exactly why we have you on this podcast. So it is not easy, and it is different, and yet that's what I found so just interesting, moving, helpful, and so I was looking forward to being able to chat about that. It sounds like there's a whole nother podcast in there, Identical Twin. Wow, that was a whole nother conversation we could have at some point. But
yeah, maybe.
Well, maybe before we get into the book, John, maybe you can explain how you know Marty or how you found out about Bama or whatever your introduction was to the world that our listeners are familiar with, and then we'll talk about how we came to know you.
Sure. I heard about Bama from my friend Steve Brand. Said hey, you need to listen to this Bama. And he's been a longtime friend, really with me on this grief journey as well. And I would listen to it on my commute to and from work. A lot of times I would just find myself saying, oh, that's significant. In just kind of learning kind of all over again for the first time, the significance of a lot of the Old Testament, the Hebrew scripture. And you, Marty, were coming to a church near where we live, kind of a sister church. I saw you speak there, and I started kind of giving the minimum, just to support your ministry. And one day I get a random call and I look on my caller ID and it says Marty Solomon. And I told my conference call, hey, I need to take this call. And we probably talked for 2 minutes, but I'm not sure how I got on the list or anything, but that was my intro to you, Marty.
Well, that is, man, I didn't know you stepped out of a conference call just to take my little old phone call. How about that? But it's actually it was really interesting as I got ready for this chat today. I kind of went back and was thinking about that. I did. I met John through our donor database, and John was giving this regular small gift before it was cool. Like, and we'll leave the dollar amount out of this, but John really is responsible in a lot of ways. I've never even thanked you for this, John. But like, I looked at that and went, oh my goodness, do you know that if more people did that, there's so many people listening that, like, you were a part of this kind of seed that led to what so many other listeners have been able to participate in. And so, yeah, it was kind of cool. But long before it was the thing to do, John was doing that. And yeah, I got to connect with him. And then I think you sent me your book in the mail.
Mm-hmm.
And I get a lot of books, John, and a lot of people send me their books. And I got it and I opened it and I went, oh, okay. And then I started reading it, and I think like I'm a chapter in, and I'm trying to remember. I don't think I knew your story, your family's story at this point. I don't believe I did. And I get like a chapter in and I'm like, oh goodness. Oh, wow. Okay, I'm going to buckle up here. And then I start looking. I like go to the back of the book because I'm like, oh man, is this guy a therapist? Is he a psychologist? Like, who is this guy? What's going on here? Because it changes the posture that you have when you interact with a book. Am I reading somebody that has professional expertise? And I've discovered, like, that's not where this book is coming from. This book is coming from somebody that has experience. And there's two different kinds of expertise that we all know we're familiar with. And yours was of that second kind. And it was unbelievably well written. I'm still like totally stunned at how well written this book is and easy to read it is, just knowing where it comes from. But it was just full of like chapter after chapter, just all these just little rich nuggets that were coming from just your experience. You were simply sharing as somebody that had been on a journey and is on a journey. You were sharing these like thoughts. It wasn't heavy-handed. It wasn't coming like, this is the way that it was just like, here's the thing. Here's an experience I've had. Here's something I've learned. And my wife always comes over every morning kind of as our paths connect. I'm reading. She's heading out to give the dog a walk. And we always have this exchange. And she would come over and like half the mornings, I'm like crying in tears. And she's like, oh man, is this book pretty good? And I'm like, you have no idea. So wow. This book was just such a, you surprised me. You caught me unawares, John. But wow. Since most haven't read your book or know of your story, would you share briefly, like whatever details you'd like to share about the story? And I know we've had a conversation about how this is something you like, you want to lean into. We also recognize like these things would be tough. But anything you'd like to share about the story and what's led you to this chapter in your journey and what people will find in this book about grief?
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, I did want to thank you for being willing to go there, go here with us on our journey our journey of grief, not just grief, but it's really in the end, grief in God. And I just figure a little intro to Olivia, because that's certainly the backdrop to all of this. She was our youngest child. We called her our Puerto Rican child, my wife, Beta. She's from Puerto Rico. And Olivia was, she had the olive skin, the brown eyes, the long black curly hair. She was tall and beautiful. And we like to say she was an old soul. When it came to music, she liked September by Earth, Wind and Fire. One day I was listening to a country song on my Pandora. She came by and said, Dad, let me help you out. And she changed it to a Motown station for me. And she had gone on several service trips, mission trips, one to Nicaragua and two to Bolivia. And she liked to make videos of them and set them to music. And so the last one to Bolivia, it's really, 8 weeks before she passed away. She did the video and set it to this beautiful Johnny Mathis song. And I just think, it's deep. It's a deep song. It's a deeply meaningful video, obviously now. But, how many 18-year-olds know about Johnny Mathis. And so anyway,
Sure.
yeah.
Which Johnny Mathis song was it, John?
It's called Not For Me to Say. And I'll just throw that out there. I'm sure there's a link now that you mentioned
Brent will get it in the show notes. That's what he does. He's magic at that.
Yeah. That sounds good. So anyway, she was a very engaging. She was known for her kindness. She did like to have a good time. And she was a great dancer. I mean, I could kind of go on, right? But the backstory is it was our anniversary. 25 years. And she was packed and ready to leave for college. And she was 3 days away from leaving. And of course, she had everything packed. She was totally ready to get out of the house. And Beta and I came in. They had left somewhere. We didn't know where she and Emily, her sister, had gone. But we came in and we sat down as just with dessert and our gifts to exchange to each other. Literally, we were just sitting down, and that's when we got the call from Emily. And it was actually 5 girls. It was an auto accident. The 3 girls, Blair, Megan, and Carly, they're all just such good friends. The 4 of them were all okay. Some bruises and cracked ribs and a couple things like that. But that's Olivia passed away. So again, that's a deep and hard story to listen to. I realized that, but that's just how the grief journey began for us.
Yeah, that's it's so difficult for me to even comprehend what that's like, and I wonder, like a lot of people have grief in some way or another. I think in your case, it's maybe more tragic because parents aren't supposed to see their kids go. It's supposed to be the other way around. I mean, quote unquote, supposed to be. But a lot of people have gone through some kind of grief like that. Not very many people end up writing a book about it. So what drove you to write about it at all? And maybe what led you to the point where you're like, this needs to be a full blown book, and maybe talk about that process?
What I realized early on is people process grief in different ways. For example, my wife Beta, she was into journaling, but often she would just write her emotions, write out her prayers. She would get her circle of friends. That was kind of her way. My way was kind of to withdraw, and not in a bad way, but just to kind of have these alone times where I would meditate, think, and really start diving into some of the questions I had about what had happened and about God and about the Bible. Reed Dent did this thing on deconstruction, and I still don't know if I grasped all of what he was talking about, but I just feel like, okay, I need to rethink. Literally, I mean, I'm not over dramatizing this. I just feel like I need to rethink God in light of these questions. And Bema, it was a good time to kind of come into Bema overall, because growing up, and I summarize this in the book, I looked at the Bible, and there's a bumper sticker. This is long ago, but God said it, I believe it, and that settles it. And I said, no, I can't do that anymore. That's not going to work for me as a griever. That's not going to work for me as someone who has trauma. I need to be able to look at the Bible not as commands, not to simply bend my will somewhere, because it's sinful. I need better, I hope there's better answers and a better view of God than kind of where I was. And that's where this journey started. It started in my journaling, and I would start asking questions. Why did this happen? That was my first question. I asked it right in the ER. My friend Buzz, he and Virginia are the parents of Carly and Blair, two of the girls in the accident. And I said, I was hugging him goodbye. They were going home. And I said, how could this have happened? And that to me is a spiritual question. That's fair game. And I had to I didn't have to find the answer, but I had to ask it, if that makes sense. So I started doing that and asking, is it okay to ask why? Was this the will of God? Deep, these are, obviously deep questions, but I think they're worthy questions, certainly in grief, certainly in, trauma, pain. Where was God? Why didn't he prevent this from happening? How do I get back to normal? Is there a normal? Things of that nature. And I journaled and I shared things as I went. And one person in particular, Terrell Brand, Steve Brand's wife, said, hey, this is a book. This is a book. You have to keep writing. And that's, so I did. And it kind of just came together as this book.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the notes that you even had, and some of these questions are really big and philosophical, and some of these questions are really practical and everything in the middle. Like one of the questions you have written down here is just, how do I get out of bed? Like, I can't imagine how many people relate to that in the middle of grief, trauma, depression. Like, yeah, like sometimes it's big, lofty, like, who is God and why did this happen? And sometimes it's, how do I just do the next thing that I have to do?
Right. It's, for me, along those lines of thinking, it was, how do I make it through today?
Right.
Can I make it through the day? And really, even at the end of a day saying, I made it. I made it through this day, So, yeah, that's very real.
Yeah. So what kind of, as you've written this and kind of let this book out into the world, which has to be like a unique kind of intimate creation of yours, what kind of responses have you experienced and what have you seen from others as they interact with your story, whether it's the book or just knowing you and those relationships? What have you seen in others as they interact with these ideas?
Sure. It's been really interesting. One area that I've gotten as feedback is how several folks have said, I started the book and I had to put it down, and I couldn't go forward. It was too much for them, and I get it. In fact, I kind of give people a heads up, and it's not that I bring people into the actual story of what happened. It's more of facing these emotions, rethinking about God. It's all intense, and it does bring people into kind of an intense area that they might not have looked at in a while. And so but it's been interesting for me to see. I think as I've gotten a few years in, it's been 5 years, I used to say, oh, that's okay. Oh, don't, I get it. And I still feel that way, that it might be necessary to hold off. But overall, it's like, it's important to go there at some time. It's important, whether it's my story or your neighbor's story or the person has gone through something similar. And there's plenty of people, whether it's their story, it's important, to go there eventually. And so it's been an interesting level of feedback there. I've gotten a lot of great, deeply meaningful responses, a lot of gratitude, changed my life, or just wow, and that's been very meaningful too. I don't really have the vocabulary yet, really, it's not like I look at those things and say, oh, great, because right. It's still grief and there's always going to be this backstory there. But what I like most about it is when we are able to have a conversation. And that's I think the whole goal of the book for me is to hear people's stories. I've I've shared mine, and now I get to hear theirs, and we can kind of walk this path together.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. You said in some of your notes you haven't gotten nearly as much feedback from younger people. I would imagine that's because they haven't gone through and relate to deep. I mean, obviously, many of them have. That's an overgeneralization, but just the less life lived, the less grief, the less trauma at least that kind of crisis and tragedy you've experienced. Is there anything else that you see in that jumps to your mind that you think is important?
Well, I just have noted it and noticed that was, I mean, it's just been interesting. Overall, I think back to when I was young, and I was certainly out of touch. And because there were so many this is a story about a tragedy among young people. A lot of those people are going through, are going through it. The grief journey, their grief journey started that same night too, in their own way. And I guess I would liken it really to Ecclesiastes 7, the entering the house of mourning. And again, that came from a friend of mine who had been down this road before I did. Trip, he shared that with me. And I remember reading that scripture as a young person and just kind of writing it off. It's about, I look at Ecclesiastes maybe as a whole. I remember thinking, Solomon had a bad day, when he wrote Ecclesiastes. Sure. Right. But as an older person, I look at it and I say, Solomon was right, in a lot of areas. And this is one area that it's important to go there, even as a young person, really at any age, but certainly as a young person to go there. It's necessary, and it's something that everybody at some level will experience. So there's some wisdom, I guess, is what I mean, and what he was saying.
Yeah. Now, you're again, what I loved about your book is it was just full of really well-articulated nuggets of experiential wisdom and reflections. But I also felt like it avoided like the dangerous temptations to resolve. Like you write these books and the temptation is like, well, I want to give people answers. I want to give people resolution. And you obviously avoided that because of things that you had experienced and things you knew from that experience. And you avoided drifting to extremes. Like one of my favorite examples of this is in the book. You talk about grief not being your enemy, but it's also not your friend. Mm-hmm. And I loved that because when I first read you talk about grief is not my enemy, I'm like, yeah. And like, there was a part of me that was like, yeah, grief's going to be my companion. And then like, right as I started to think grief is my friend, you said, it's also not my friend. Like it's going to be along for the ride, but it's neither of those. And so it was like, as somebody untrained in psychology and grief, it was for me a really healthy and balanced interaction with the experience of grief. So does that come from your personality? Does that come from time in counseling, relationships with other people, something God led you to and told you, reflections on just the scripture, all the above? Where does that come from, John?
All right. Well, the first part of your question really is another reason why I wrote the book. And it's not like the other books are wrong in any way or whatever, reading, lots of online resources. I just couldn't resonate with going there so quickly. I couldn't resonate with hopping to promises fulfilled in heaven. And I am on this earth and I got to live through this next day. I got to figure out how to piece together my life. I got to help my wife. My wife has to help me. I have to help my children. I need something more with more depth. And all of this, really, I got to certainly figure out me and God and understand all of that. So let's see. You mentioned grief not being your enemy, not being your friend. I was drawn to grief being the enemy, and not to overgeneralize about men, but certainly it just certainly wasn't in my nature to be, it's much more in my nature to fight the sadness or to say, how can I get out of this sadness as soon as possible? When will this be over? And all those, shortcuts are stifling, things of that nature is just not in our best interest. But it is so common. And being in it now, I feel it, and I'm like, I need to write about this and write through this. And it's not our friend either. I guess part of this is I've seen it. I had an old neighbor who passed away last year. He was a good friend, and he had a saying called, when I went to visit him, he would say, John, I've seen some things. And, he was just, what he meant by that was he's about to tell me a story, and it's going to be rich. And I feel like I seen some things in life that obviously have helped me as a 55-year-old who's been through this tragedy. I seen some things, and that has helped. I would say also I'm surrounded by therapists somehow. And, I'm married to a therapist. That's what Beta does for a living. My good friend, Steve, he's my hiking buddy as well. And when we go on hikes, I know the deal. I'm going to get the therapy questions. And I say it in jest, it's a blessing. I mean, it's a real blessing. And we have a psychiatrist friend, so dear, a psychologist friend, Michelle, who was the mom of the other girl, Megan, who was in the accident, that are our best friends. And so the joke is I need all these people, around me. But the way I look at it is if I believe in a God who not controls everything, but a God who orchestrates, who intervenes, who works for the good, I believe those people were in my life for such a time as this. I mean, that's kind of how I look at it. And so when you ask me that question, those are the types of things I think about.
Yeah, you mentioned having, I love in the notes you said, I have my Jonathans, my Nathans, my Abigails. I love that, because this is what's just been true for God's people for thousands of years. These voices that God brings into our lives to speak to us in the right ways at the right times. Some people there to encourage us and come alongside, some people to speak hard truths, but people that are in relationship. And I love how much, like, you do bring a lot of reflection from the scriptures all throughout your book, every chapter, in our conversations that we've had personally. You have a really good relationship with the text too, and that I'm sure that has meant a lot to you in the midst of all of this as well.
Yes, I mean, like I said earlier, Bema has been part of this journey, and just being able to relook at scriptures I thought I always knew. For example, Jeremiah 29. And it sounds so simple now when I talk about it, but it is starting in verse 11 kind of version of that promise, or what we kind of take as a promise that we can, take our stance on. I had to rethink that. How does that fit? How does that thinking fit with me? And I realized, that promise is not exactly the way I should be applying it. It shows God's heart, shows God's faithfulness, but it also is a promise that says it's 70 years from now. There's more to it. And I've been doing Bible in a year this year, and I continue to find things that help me in my grief. But what I realized is I need to read Jeremiah 1 through 28. It's like I have to earn my right to
Sure.
see that in Jeremiah 29. And anyway, so that's that, and many other examples, as you mentioned, are, help me along this journey.
So, John, the book was published in March 2020, which is an interesting time to do anything, really.
Yeah.
But we're coming up on, almost 2 years, and I'm wondering, like, what, I think most books have like an initial flurry of activity, and then it's just kind of like a long tail of whatever. And so I'm just wondering, like, what your hopes and desires are for the book going forward. Like, what do you expect people to, how do you expect people to engage the book, or whatever else? I don't know if you have any other future plans for more books, from things you've learned since then, or whatever. So yeah, just give us an idea of where you think things are going.
I think the main thing I would like for people to do is to have a source where they can lean into it. They can go there. They can go toward the pain and the grief. And it sounds weird to say that, certainly not in our culture in any way, shape, or form. But I just have found it to be necessary, and it's something that we can't fear. I do think what will help us, and I hope people realize, is that there is a God who understands. There's a God who's fully aware. There is a God who is comforting. I mean, you think about the three descriptions, God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. It's a wonderful counselor. It's a counselor. God is I mentioned therapist earlier. God is the wonderful counselor. It is Jesus who walks with us, grieving with us. And that story was Lazarus grieving with Mary and Martha. And I even write in the book there, I get more meaning out of that than him raising Lazarus from the dead. Like, sincerely, he is walking with me right here. And that's what I want people to resonate with and see about God and the Holy Spirit, who goes by the name of Comforter, and that's, people see, again, Bema exists to kind of help us rethink a lot about what we know about the heart and character of God. And this journey and this book, I hope, will help people into that. And I think in general, again, this is such a difficult thing for people to it's not like getting in touch with our emotions. It's, you talk about journeys. As an example, my daughter, Emily, she gave me a book, and it's a book to get to know your dad. It's about 160 pages. And all it has is one question at the top and a blank page for me to fill out with answering that question. And every 4 or 5 pages, it has a quote from, Walt Whitman or Maya Angelou. And I was actually at my same desk working here at home, and it hit me the way people, not the way people, it sounds kind of judgmental, but the way a lot of us looks at a journey. And they look at, the question I was supposed to answer was, what is if you could go anywhere in the world, where would you go and why? And I wrote about the places I would go, but at the end I came up with my own, saying, because I just felt like I had to. But it said the most rewarding journey is when one ventures inwardly, a spiritual journey, an in-depth exploration of the soul, a destination unknown where few dare to venture. Just came out. I was taking a break from work. I probably shouldn't have, but it came out and I wrote it down. And that's kind of what I want people to feel comfortable in doing. I know it might sound heavy or, whatever, but I see the value, like the Ephesians 3, that God being in our inmost being, that are we willing to go there ourselves internally on this journey? God wants to go there. And so I would hope that's kind of my main goal with the book. I don't have any plan. I feel like this journey is kind of ongoing. And so I don't have any plans right now for another book per se. I do write on the side quite a bit about various subjects, and we'll see what might come out of that. But this journey is kind of ongoing, so I feel the need to kind of stick with it.
Really well said. I feel like the next time I'm at one of those icebreakers and somebody asks that question, I'm going to really just lay one on them. And they're just going to be like, oh, wow. I'm going to act like I just came up with the greatest thought in the world. But that's great. Really well said, John. So I think I have one more kind of big thought and question before we start working towards a close here. Your chapter on guilt was the one that just rocked me. I think my wife too. I think I know the answer to this question, but I ask it just to get some of your reflection. Has all of this gone away? Like, has any of this gotten, like, quote unquote better over time as you've dealt with grief? Has it changed? What has that experience been like?
Those are deep waters you're venturing into there, Marty. Let's see. I would say yes and no, and I'm sure that's what you might expect me to say. I guess I look at this answer. I mean, guilt, it was such a hard chapter to write. It was just dealing with the emotion of grief and guilt. They really go hand in hand, very common for anyone experiencing guilt. And it's just a really intense part of my journey. And I remember writing about parts in the book where I would just, I would start shaking as I'm typing. It was, hitting home, whether it was a scripture from Job and Job's friends in particular. I talk about that. A walk with my friend Andrew about guilt after kind of seeing a part of a movie scene, a church event. And kind of talking through, where were you, Dad? That was, things of that nature I had to work through. And it was helpful. One of the biggest things is at the end, I'm almost done with the chapter and I'm like, I don't know why guilt has such a grasp on me. And then I realized, hey, it's not grasping me, I'm grasping it. And I'm grasping it because I want to have an answer, or I'm angry, or I want to answer the question of why in particular, and somehow it ends up back with me. But that even of itself was helpful for me. So the question is the right one. It's not linear, really, like you can't plot it on a graph. I would say it's like the rest of grief. I have good days and bad days, but I think most importantly, having a place to go, having an alternative, and that's introduced again and again in the Bible. Isaiah 61, having that alternative with God there brings something different into the picture that allows for some hope, even though you don't feel it right now. And the way you worded the question, if you don't mind, I, as a husband, and how I look at my role, like I said earlier, as a father to grievers, as a husband to a griever, as a griever, I read simple scriptures like love is patient, grief is just, can be very destructive to relationships. And I can be, I can now read 1 Corinthians 13, which I might have heard at my wedding and picked up a couple times then, but love is patient, love is kind. I need to be, as a husband, bringing that into my situation. As a Ephesians 5, when I read about the husband and Jesus and the church and all those thoughts are kind of intertwined, well, now I need to think about, well, how, am I going to be the gentle healer in my relationship? I mean, there's parts of it that are broken. They'll be healed over time, but I need to bring kind of this, a gentle healer approach, a Jesus approach. Anyway, I guess I'm just saying that it changes my thoughts in all my relationships.
Absolutely. So there's this sense of, there's no way this has all gone away. It's probably not going away, yet you find yourself also growing and you find yourself it is a journey. It is a hike. It is you're moving. You're not stuck. And it's this dynamic thing where you're continuing to learn and let it shape and change you. If I'm hearing you correctly, I like that.
Right.
So, John, most of my experience with grief is as a friend of someone else who is grieving. And even in the moments where I've had my own grief to experience, like when I was 25, I lost a roommate. But even in that case, like the other friends around me were grieving in completely different ways than I was, and probably not in the healthiest way on my end of things. I'm not the best griever, and hopefully I will learn some things from you for future experiences. But anyway, as a friend, like what are some things that you've learned along the way? Maybe some positive things, some negative things, about how you can engage someone else who's close to you, who's grieving, in a situation where you yourself don't have a way to experience that grief to the same extent. Like how should a friend be a friend in the realm of grief?
Sure. I think the first thing is just not to fear going there. Now, going there meaning not to fear being with your friend. I know a lot of us don't know the words, and that's okay. I have a friend, Stuart Latta. He and his wife lost his son, their son, and he described Job and his friends as his friends were great for the first week. And the first week, they just sat there and didn't say anything. They were just present. And I think that's probably the most important thing that you can be to a griever, is not to avoid them, to be present for them. And depending on the level of your relationship, you can ask them the questions. You can be the Jonathan and help them spiritually in their time of need, right? So there's some wisdom there, right? Don't just shoot a text, write a card, go visit if that's can be worked out. It's all part of this idea, entering the house of mourning. So I do think that we've been given gifts as people, whether it's a close friendship, whether it's wisdom. Use your gifts. It might be mowing the lawn, like someone came over and did randomly for me, or serving, or arranging, organizing, whatever it takes. There's such a role for people to play. And the way I look at this is I feel like I'm getting in the Bible it says you'll receive 100 times, brothers, sisters, mothers, etc. I feel it. I have felt that experience. And I'm very grateful for it. And but that is what you can do. That is what we can do for each other. And it helps the Bible and a verse like that come alive in real life during grief.
Yeah, I love the wisdom, the Jewish practice of sitting Shiva being very similar. Just show up and commit to being there. Saying less. Worrying what to do less, as long as you're committed to the person in the relationship and being fully present. I love how you keep bringing this back to the wisdom of Ecclesiastes. Well, I think we suggested in our episode, if I remember right, Brent, could even be the center of if there is anything chiastic going on, seems to almost be the pinnacle part of Ecclesiastes, chiasm or not, this Ecclesiastes 7, entering the house of mourning. There's wisdom there. There's wisdom there.
Yep.
And it's not going to be easy wisdom. It's not going to be, I think it compares the house of mourning to the house of feasting and of festival and party and celebration. Listen, it'll be a whole lot more fun over there. And yet there's wisdom and there's purpose and there's something meaningful and grounded in a house of mourning. And I have not learned that well as a pastor. I remember getting into campus ministry thinking I'm so glad I will make less and less hospital calls, and yet that was me just avoiding something that really there's, the older I get and the more people I'm surrounded by, there's wisdom there that I've missed out on for the sake of my comfort and convenience. And so, yeah, I like that, especially in relationship to our friends, our deepest friends. So, John, is there anything else as we close this conversation? Anything that you're working on or involved with? It doesn't have to be even be something that you're in charge of, but anything out there that we need to know about from John Roberts, related or unrelated. This is your shot to make your big promo of something awesome. Anything that we need to know about with John?
Well, we do have. I remember Olivia had gone to Bolivia a couple times, and we have a nonprofit. You can find out more information. It's beolivialibrary.com, and the theme is to be like Olivia. And it's b-olivialibrary.com. I'm sure, Brent, you can put it in the show notes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and a Spanish version is coming out. A Spanish version of the book, such a big need, and so that's coming out here in the next 2-3 months. I am an elder in training at my church, and I'm just seeing where God kind of takes that. So that's a big part of my been a big part of my last 5-6 months. So that's an interesting journey, and a personal. I mean, I've been doing Bible in a year, like I said, and I write a lot, and I keep getting stuck going back to Jephthah and his daughter in that story. And this, just for what it's worth, I just can't leave it alone. And the meaning of it, I think I'm just kind of starting to touch. Gift Talk is what L. Grover Fricks that you had on, or as part of your team, I guess.
Yes.
So anyway, that's some of what I'm doing.
Brilliant. Love it.
And John, if anyone is interested in getting a hold of you, reaching out for whatever reason, sharing their own stories of how your book affected them or helped them or whatever, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
It's probably through email, and it's listed, I'm sure, on that Be Olivia Library site. But I can give it to you now.
Well, I'm okay with making people work for it a little bit. If they want to get a hold of you, they can go check out your website. So that's fine.
Okay.
I love it. Yes.
I think that does it for this episode. Marty, do you have any other closing thoughts before we close it down?
And I would say this at the end of any interview, but in a really special way, I mean this. Just thank you, John, for giving of yourself to write the book, giving of yourself to share your story, not just in the book, but in so many ways, and being willing to come on here and talk about this and just so clearly invite us, challenge us, encourage us to go there in those spaces. So in maybe a unique and significant way, I'm very thankful for your contribution today. So thanks for being here.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
There's nobody out there who doesn't need a little bit of a guide in this process. So it's very important, and your vulnerability and sharing your story to help others is definitely very encouraging to me. So thank you as well.
Thank you, Brent.
Yeah. So that does it for this episode. If you want to get a hold of Marty, you can find him on Twitter at Marty Solomon. I'm at EIBCB. And you can go to BEMADiscipleship.com to find more details about the show. So thanks for joining us on the BEMA podcast this week. We'll talk to you again soon.